on St Bridget's Day, they used to get anybody whose name was Bridget up to stand in assembly, and you just sort of stood there. So so it sort of got me used to this sort of thing, you know. And at least we have January over us at last, thank goodness. So welcome to Flash Fiction Saturday night in the museum, and it is really wonderful to be back in the museum because they give us wine. Thank you. And I'm thrilled to have Flash Fiction Armagh involved with Orlaith Cullinane's exhibition on the stray sod. And it's down in the room as you come up the stairs, you know, in the first room. And so please do take time to have a look at the exhibits and pick up one of these as well. It's the catalogue of the exhibits, and there's information in it about the exhibits and so on. But it's really inspiring. But I won't prolong the chit-chat too much because I'm afraid that they might put me into the scolding bridle, which is down there. You can have a look at that. It looks quite fearsome. So thank you to the writers for sharing their work. And as I read the submissions, each story took me on a journey. And I experienced a different reality, as I hope you all do too. From the safety of your own chair, you experience this different reality. And then at the end of the story, you return back to where you're sitting. And everything around you is the same as it was when you left it. And I realised that with each submission, I do come back a little bit changed, a tiny bit changed. And I realised that this theme, the stray sod, accurately sums up the process of reading. And that the act of reading in itself is therefore a stray sod experience. So if you're not familiar with what the stray sod alludes to, it's about being lost in a familiar environment. And there's stories about, you know, the farmer going into the field and he trips over a stray sod and then he can't find his way out of the field. Or a mist comes down and he gets lost in the mist and then he can't see familiar features. It's that sort of thing, you know. But being lost in a familiar terrain. A bit like Brexit. Anyway, had to make some comment. So as we build our writing community, it is lovely to see familiar faces returning to read, or some people are here just to listen. They've read before and they're here to listen and support their fellow writers. And there are people who haven't read yet, but hopefully will do in the future, supporting their fellow writers. And it is equally lovely to welcome new faces, and for some it's the first time reading their work in public. So we have some very, very new readers, so please give them the support that you always do give. We have a really supportive audience, so don't be nervous. Do be nervous, we're all nervous. So, but you'll be great. So the submission standard this time, extremely high, as I'm sure you'll agree when you hear this selection of fabulous stories. And it was really hard to turn away some of the great stories that didn't make it. And if you didn't get through on this occasion, please don't be disheartened. Please do consider submitting more of your work in the future. So now I would like to actually invite Orla up. Orlaith Cullinane, the artist who did all the lovely pieces in the other room. I'm sure you have a name for the other room. Orla will know the name of that room. Just had to talk while you were coming on up there, Orla.
It's a long walk. I'm only going to say a few words. It's a long walk for that. The other room's called the gallery.
Oh, the gallery.
And there's actually two of them, so you can wander around both of them. There's plenty of space. The exhibition resulted from my spell here as an artist in residence last year. I kind of started last January, and I was really working here until maybe around July time. So an artist in residence meant I came in here for 2-3 days a week and parked myself usually there, and just drew inspiration from the work from initially the objects in the museum, but as you went along, a lot of my experiences just being in the museum sort of wove their ways into the work and the work I ended up producing in the exhibition. So, which is essentially what being an artist in residence is about. I didn't set out intending to call it the stray sod, but as Byddi kind of described the sense of what the stray sod is, I really kind of I really got a feel for that while I was here, because I mean, if you've ever spent any time in here during the day, you know, you'll realise how quiet it is and how there's almost like fabricy texture to the quiet, especially when you're here on your own. There's nobody else here. So it really was a sense of being removed from the everyday and the familiarity. And I'm I'm from Armagh originally myself, so everything here is very familiar to me from a very young age. And then when I was able to go through all the catalogues, and I had the amazing help of the staff here, Sarah and Sean and Dawn and John, and it's a wee rhyme I have in my head, Roy, who just know so much about everything you could ask them about. So that really led you down all these paths, these kind of objects that just came from townlands that you knew, and there's like whole histories layered on there. So that was really the basis of where I went with the artwork and the visual artwork, kind of making up stories and kind of whatever feelings that inspired in it. So I would love if you all wanted to have a look at the exhibition at any point. It's on to the 22nd of February. And my plug, can I do a plug now? I'm actually doing an artist's talk, like a kind of tour of the exhibition on the 22nd, thanks Sarah. 22nd of February, that's the last day of it, at 11 a.m. So it's about an hour, kind of talk about the various pieces, and the objects that I used are all in little cases beside them there. So looking forward to that. Okay, thanks very much. I'm really looking forward to hearing the stories as well. Actually, that's my whole point in being here.
And another thing I would, really stress to it, especially to the writers in the audience, is that the museum is a really rich source of inspiration for stories. I think the very first flash fiction story I wrote for Flash Fiction Armagh was inspired by one of the exhibits. Beheaded, it was called, and it was an exhibit here in it was actually down in the gallery, I think. But anyway, it was an exhibit here in the Armagh Museum, and it's as if the stories cling to the objects that are on display. It's hard to escape them. And with that, I just really want to thank the museum again, Sarah, Sean, and the museum staff, who are really superb hosts, and I'm sure you'll agree. And of course, I want to thank you, the audience, whether you're writers in the audience or just here to listen. You're really important in this whole dynamic, because you're why we write. We need your ears. So thank you for supporting your local writers. And I have it somewhere, but we have the Bramley, okay, on sale, £5. But there's a couple of Bramleys in the audience somewhere going around for people who are in that Bramley who have not yet signed it. I'm giving a copy to the museum for their archives with all your signatures on it, or as many of your signatures as I can gather up. I even had to go to Paris, because do you remember last year 3 girls came over from Paris? So, it was terrible. I had to go all the way to Paris to get those 3 signatures. I know, it was really hard, but, well, anyway. So, usually we have a lovely, orange sheet for Flash Fiction Armagh, to tell everybody the order of who's reading and who they are and what they're reading. And Raymond prints it out beautifully every time, except this time he left it at home. So we still have it, but it's just in Raymond's briefcase somewhere. But I'm sure that, so it's kind of, it's going to be a nice surprise for you, because you don't know who's up next. So it means you're actually listening to me in between readers, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to get started.